The desert sun was sinking when the rancher found her half buried in dust, wrists raw from rope, eyes hollow with pain. She looked up at him, trembling, the barrel of his rifle casting a shadow across her face. "Please," she whispered, voice barely a breath. "I beg you, just make it quick." He stood frozen, unsure if she was outlaw or victim, angel or ghost. Her lips cracked as she added, "They said you'd finish what they started." Something inside him twisted. He lowered the gun. Instead of pulling the trigger, he reached for her hand. What he did next would brand his name across the frontier, because mercy, out here, was sometimes the most dangerous act of all. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a ride into the Old West. The rancher's wagon rattled over the hardpan, its wheels creaking like the bones of the desert itself as twilight bled across the horizon. He glanced down at her, the woman half swaddled in his torn blanket, her skin glistening with fever and blood, her breath catching with each jolt of the road. Every instinct in him screamed to turn back, to leave her where he found her and wash his hands of whatever devil business she'd stumbled out of, but her voice still echoed in his head, that trembling plea that didn't sound like guilt or deceit, but despair. "You're safe now," he told her, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. The chain clinking against the wagon floor mocked him with every turn of the wheel. She stirred suddenly, eyes flickering open, the dying light catching the green in them like a flash of buried glass. "They'll come for me," she rasped. "You don't understand. You shouldn't have found me." He didn't answer, just kept his hand firm on the reins. The wind whipped across the plain, carrying with it the scent of sage and storm. He thought of the ranch, a lonely stretch of land framed by red cliffs and silence, and wondered if he'd just invited the devil into his home. When she tried to sit up, pain racked her body, forcing a cry through her lips that made him grit his teeth. He pulled the wagon to a stop near a dry creek bed and poured what little water he had into her cupped hands. "Drink slow," he muttered. She obeyed, eyes never leaving his face, as though she was trying to decide if he was her salvation or her executioner. Under the fading sun, he saw the brand seared into her shoulder, 2 letters intertwined, black against the bruised skin. He knew that mark. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. It belonged to men who took what they wanted and buried what they broke. He felt his stomach twist as he looked away, the pieces beginning to fit together like rusted iron. "Who did this?" he asked, quietly, though he already knew the answer. "Rogers," she whispered, the name scraping out of her throat like a confession. His jaw tightened. Jedediah Rogers, cattle king, land thief, and worse. The man had driven half the county into debt or dust. The rancher had crossed paths with him once, and it nearly cost him his life. Now here lay proof that Rogers's cruelty had sunk lower than anyone dared to speak. "He'll kill you for this," she said weakly. "For helping me." He looked out toward the horizon, where the first stars were breaking through the purple dusk. "Let him try," he said. He hitched the horses again, steering toward the line of mountains where his ranch waited, a fortress of solitude soon to become a battleground. Behind them, far off in the desert wind, a dust cloud began to rise. Faint but growing, the sign of riders closing in. The rancher felt it before he saw it, that crawling sense of eyes in the dark, of fate catching up. He glanced once more at the woman, her head now resting against the wagon's side, lashes trembling with the edge of sleep. He didn't know her name, her story, or the truth behind those haunted eyes, but he knew this. Whatever she'd run from was coming fast, and he'd already chosen his side. The night settled thick over the ranch, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls and carried every creak like a confession. Inside, the woman lay on his bed, her back bandaged with torn strips of linen, her skin damp from fever. The rancher Jared sat by the lamp's flicker, watching her lips move in restless murmurs. Over and over, that same word slipped from her mouth, his name. "Jared," she whispered, soft as wind through dry grass, but it cut through him sharper than a blade. He'd never seen her before, yet she said his name like she'd known it her whole life. He poured more whiskey over a rag and wiped the sweat from her brow, trying to ignore the chill crawling up his spine. Outside, coyotes yipped at the moon, and the horses in the corral stamped nervously, as if they too sensed something circling unseen. He turned back to her, her face caught in the wavering light, beautiful in a broken way, as if carved from sorrow and fire. "How the hell do you know me?" he muttered, but she didn't answer. Instead, her hand twitched, grasping at the air like she was reaching for something long gone. He sighed, stood, and went to fetch more water. That's when he saw her satchel on the floor beside the chair, leather ripped, edges blackened by dust and time. Curiosity overrode caution. He crouched and opened it, sifting through scraps, a cracked mirror, a blood-stained ribbon, a handful of coins. Then his fingers brushed paper. He unfolded it slowly, expecting a map or a letter, but froze as the firelight revealed the inked outline of his own face staring back. Beneath it, bold letters read, "Jared Raleigh, wanted for murder and theft. $500 dead or alive." His pulse pounded like a hammer. He looked again to the bed, to the woman mumbling his name, and for a moment, the world tilted. He'd been running from that poster for years. From the lie that cost him everything, his land, his brother, his peace. But no one had ever found him out. Here. No one should have. He crumpled the paper in his hand, his jaw tight enough to ache. "Who sent you?" he whispered to the sleeping woman, though the answer twisted somewhere in his gut already. Maybe Rogers wasn't chasing her at all. Maybe she'd been sent to draw him out. He paced the room, boots scraping the wooden floor, his mind clawing through possibilities. Yet every time he looked at her, every time she winced or breathed his name like a prayer, something in him faltered. She didn't look like a bounty hunter. She looked like someone broken by the same kind of lies that had broken him. Still, the guilt gnawed at him, memories of the past clawing back through time. The fire at Silver Ridge, the scream in the dark, the blood he could never wash from his hands. He poured himself a drink, downed it, and stared out the window at the dark ridges beyond his land. In the distance, lightning flickered soundlessly, tracing the outline of the mountains like ghostly handwriting. He turned back toward her, and her eyes were open now, wide, aware, and glinting with something unreadable. "You shouldn't have saved me," she said, voice low, hoarse with meaning. "You've only just buried yourself again." And in the echo of her words, Jared Raleigh knew the desert hadn't finished with him yet. The first blush of dawn bled pale across the valley, washing the land in ghost light as Jared stepped onto his porch, rifle slung low and heart pounding like a war drum. The air was still, the kind of stillness that meant trouble was coming. And sure enough, the horizon shimmered with dust, a rising cloud that only meant one thing: riders. He lifted the spyglass, breath-catching when he saw the man leading them. Cole Maddox, bounty hunter, tracker, and once Jared's closest friend before money turned his soul sour. Maddox rode like he owned the earth, hat low, jaw set hard, and at his back, half a dozen men bristling with guns and vengeance. Jared's gut twisted. They weren't passing through, they were coming for him. His eyes drifted back to the window where the woman lay inside, her pale face half hidden in shadow. She was awake now, sitting up, watching him with that same unreadable calm that made his skin crawl. He stormed inside, the floorboards groaning under his boots. "You brought them here," he growled, tossing the crumpled wanted poster at her feet. She looked down at it without flinching, then back up, eyes steady, voice soft but cold. "They were already coming, Jared. They've been following you for weeks." The words hit him like a fist. "You expect me to believe that?" He snapped. "That this all just happened by chance, that I just happened to find you bleeding in the dirt while a posse rides to hang me for something I didn't do?" She didn't answer, only winced as she tried to stand, the chain still clinking from her wrist. "You think I planned this?" she whispered, voice trembling. "I was their prisoner, not their spy. Rogers gave me to them when I tried to run." The name struck again, sharp as barbed wire. Rogers. Of course. The bastard's reach spread farther than a man could see from any mountaintop, twisting friend against friend, truth against mercy. Jared's breath came slow, ragged, as he turned toward the window. The posse was closer now. He could see the sunlight catching their rifles, the flag of dust rising like a funeral veil. He should have run, saddled the horses, vanished into the hills where no law dared ride. But he stayed, because as much as her presence felt like a curse, her eyes, those storm-colored eyes, held something else, something true. He grabbed his revolver, checked the chambers, then tossed a rifle toward her. "Can you shoot?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded faintly, her fingers brushing the trigger like it was a memory. "I used to," she said. He watched her grip steady, the fear burning into resolve. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried a lonely, jagged sound that carried through the thinning air. "Then we hold him off long enough to prove I'm still breathing," Jared said. "After that, we disappear." She looked at him like she wanted to believe, like hope was a luxury she'd forgotten. "They'll kill you," she murmured. "Not if I kill the truth first," he replied, eyes narrowing as the first echo of hooves thundered through the valley. And as the sun climbed over the ridge, spilling gold across the cracked earth, Jared Raleigh realized that what waited outside wasn't just a posse, it was the past, come to finish the job. The moment the first gunshot echoed across the valley, Jared pulled her down behind the overturned table, splinters flying as bullets chewed through the wooden walls like locusts. The air filled with smoke and dust, and for a heartbeat, all he could hear was the rasp of her breath beside him, sharp, uneven, terrified. When the shooting paused, he turned on her, fury and betrayal flashing in his eyes. "You're gonna tell me the truth. Right now," he hissed, his voice low but edged like a knife. She flinched, clutching her wounded arm as tears pooled in her eyes, glinting with both pain and guilt. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she stammered. "I swear to you, Jared, I didn't." He pressed closer, jaw tight, the smell of gunpowder thick between them. "Then what the hell are they doing here? Calling me a murderer?" She broke then, not with words, but with a shudder that seemed to hollow her out. "They found me in Red Hollow," she said, voice cracking. "I was running from Rogers, from what he did to me. They caught me instead. The bounty men. Said they'd let me live if I brought them to the man who killed Marshall Denton. They showed me your face on a poster and told me you were a butcher hiding in the desert. I didn't know you, Jared. I swear, I didn't know." The words hit him like the butt of a gun, stealing the air from his lungs. He wanted to rage, to curse her name and throw her to the wolves waiting outside, but instead he just stared at her, searching her face for even a flicker of deceit, and found none. "So why didn't you lead them straight here?" he asked, quieter now. "Why warn me? Why lie to them?" She looked up at him then, eyes rimmed red, but steady. "Because when I saw you," she whispered, "I knew you weren't the monster they said you were. The way you carried me, the way you looked at me. I've seen killers' eyes before, Jared. Yours weren't like theirs." He froze, the words sinking into the marrow of his bones. Outside, the posse shouted orders, their boots crunching closer to the porch. The sound of horses snorting and rifles cocking filled the air like the ticking of some grim clock. Jared ran a hand through his hair, mind spinning between rage and something dangerously close to pity. "You should have told me sooner," he muttered. She nodded, trembling. "I was afraid," she said. "Afraid they'd hear me. Afraid you'd kill me before they did." A bitter laugh slipped from his throat, dry as the desert wind. "Guess you don't know me as well as you thought." He stood, loading another round into his rifle. "They'll burn this place to the ground before they take me alive. You ready to die for your mistake?" She looked up at him, something fierce stirring in her expression. "Maybe I already did," she said softly. And for a moment, the world outside seemed to hold its breath, the dust, the wind, even the morning light dimming behind the smoke. Jared looked at her one last time, seeing not the trap that brought him here, but the truth she carried like a wound, that in a land built on lies, sometimes the only redemption left was to fight beside the one who damned you. Then he cocked the rifle, squared his shoulders, and stepped toward the door as the next volley of bullets screamed through the rising Sunday. The roar of gunfire tore through the morning calm, shattering glass and wood as the ranch house exploded into chaos. Jared barely had time to grab her before the front door burst inward in a storm of bullets, the air thick with smoke and fire. "Down!" he shouted, dragging her across the floor as splinters rained around them, his heart hammering so hard it drowned out the screams of horses and men outside. The bounty riders had come back with fury, their rifles lighting up the porch like lightning in a dry storm. And the world had turned red with dust and flame. He kicked open the trapdoor by the hearth and shoved her inside the narrow cellar, the smell of earth and old oil filling their lungs. She tried to protest, but he silenced her with a look half command, half desperation. "Stay low," he growled. "And don't make a sound." Then he turned and fired back through the smoke, each shot cracking through the chaos like defiance itself. Men shouted outside, cursing his name, calling him murderer, thief, traitor, every lie the world had thrown at him come back with a trigger pull. One of them charged the door. Jared's bullet caught him mid-stride, sending his body tumbling into the firelight. But for every one that fell, 2 more came behind. The house creaked, flames licking at the beams, smoke coiling up through the rafters like the breath of hell itself. He coughed, eyes watering, then dropped through the trapdoor just as another round tore through the wall above him. She was crouched in the dark, trembling, her face streaked with soot, tears cutting through the grime. "They'll burn us alive," she whispered. "Not if I burn them first," he answered, pushing the door shut above them and plunging the world into shadow. Through the gaps in the floorboards, he could see the boots of men moving through the house, hear the groan of fire devouring the walls he'd built with his own hands. The sound was worse than gunfire. It was memory, loss, everything he'd fought to bury now clawing back from the grave. He reloaded slowly, counting each bullet like a heartbeat. "You should have left me," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "You should have let me die out there." He turned to her, the glow from the flames above painting his face in amber light. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not built to watch someone burn." The floorboards cracked overhead, ash drifting down like snow, and the air grew hotter, tighter, meaner. He aimed toward the flicker of movement through the cracks, one rider stepping too close and fired. The scream that followed was short, ragged, swallowed by the roar of the inferno. "You'll get yourself killed," she cried, grabbing his arm. "That's the idea," he said flatly, pushing her back as another round of shots rained down. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the house groaned and the fire raged, a beast consuming its master. Then, from somewhere outside, came a shout, Maddox's voice, booming through the smoke. "You can't hide forever, Raleigh. You come out, and maybe I'll let her live." Jared froze, the words cutting deeper than any bullet. He looked at her pale, shaking, eyes wide with fear and something else, something pleading, and knew that whatever happened next, there'd be no walking away clean. He chambered his last round, jaw set, heart steady. "He wants a fight," he muttered. "Let's give him one." And as the ceiling began to cave, Jared Raleigh rose from the dark like a man already half ghost, ready to face the flames head-on. The plains stretched out before them like an endless grave, shimmering beneath a merciless sun that burned the last traces of smoke from the horizon behind them. Jared half-dragged, half-carried her through the sand, their single horse staggering under the weight of exhaustion, its sides heaving with every labored breath. The house, the ranch that had once been his whole world, was gone, reduced to ashes and memory, and now all that remained was survival, baked into the cracked earth beneath their boots. The canteen clinked against his belt, nearly empty, the sound as hollow as his hope. Each step felt heavier than the last, every gust of wind cutting at their faces like shards of glass. She leaned against him, her body burning with fever, sweat slicking her brow as her breath came in shallow gasps. "You should leave me," she whispered for the 100th time, voice barely audible over the rasp of the wind. "They'll hunt you till you're dust. You can still make it if you ride alone." Jared didn't answer, just tightened his grip on her waist, steadying her when her knees buckled. "Not happening," he muttered. "I already buried enough ghosts." Her lips trembled with something between anger and sorrow. "You'll die for nothing," she said, her words slurring, the fever taking pieces of her reason with it. "You don't even know who I am." He glanced at her then, eyes shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, and for the first time, a faint, bitter smile crossed his face. "Don't need to," he said. "You're someone worth saving. That's enough." They reached a stretch of dry scrubland, the air thick with dust and silence. He helped her down beside a brittle mesquite tree and tied the horse's reins loosely to a branch, though the poor beast could barely stand. The horizon shimmered with heat, waves bending the world into something unreal. Jared knelt, shaking the canteen, barely a swallow left. He handed it to her anyway. She tried to push it back, weakly protesting, but he held her gaze until she drank. When she finished, her head fell against his shoulder, her body trembling like a dying flame. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin, the sickness burning her from the inside out. "You should have killed me when you found me," she murmured, her voice fading. "Would have been kinder." Jared's jaw tightened. "Don't talk like that," he said. "We've come too far for you to quit now." The wind picked up, whistling through the emptiness, carrying with it the faint, haunting echo of hooves in the distance, or maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on a desperate man's mind. He stared out toward the horizon, scanning for movement, for the shimmer of dust that meant pursuit. Nothing yet, but he knew they were out there. Maddox never gave up, not when there was money and blood on the line. He tore a strip from his sleeve, dipped it in the last of the water, and pressed it to her forehead. She flinched at the touch, then sighed, eyes fluttering half open. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "Because someone should," he answered simply, and though the words were quiet, they carried across the empty plains like a promise. As night began to fall, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold, Jared looked out into the dying light and knew this was only the beginning. The storm behind them was still coming, and it would find them before the dawn. The canyon swallowed them whole by dusk, its red cliffs rising like walls of some ancient tomb, the wind whispering low through the stone as if the desert itself held its breath. Jared guided the half-dead horse into the shadows, his every muscle aching, his throat raw from thirst, the weight of survival pressing harder than the heat ever could. He found a shallow hollow beneath an overhang where the air was cooler and the sand softer, then lowered her gently down, her face pale and slick with fever. The last of the light flickered across her skin, turning her sweat into glints of fire. And for a moment, she looked almost unreal, like something the desert had conjured out of dust and sorrow. Jared knelt beside her, scanning the ridge above for signs of riders, but only silence met him deep and endless. When he turned back, she was staring at him, eyes glassy but clear enough to hold something heavy, something she'd been burying since the moment he found her. "Jared," she whispered, her voice rasping like the wind scraping over rock. "There's something you need to know." He frowned, pouring the last drops from the canteen into her hands. "Save your strength," he muttered. But she shook her head weakly, clutching his sleeve with trembling fingers. "No," she said. "You need to hear it, before it's too late." Her breath hitched, and then the words came, broken but sharp as shattered glass. "You didn't kill Marshall Denton the way they said. You didn't murder him." Jared froze, the name hitting him like a strike to the gut. "What do you mean I didn't? I shot him, damn it. You don't walk away from that." She coughed, shaking her head, tears cutting through the grime on her cheeks. "I was there," she said. "That day at the ridge. Roger sent me to collect the deed papers. You didn't know me then. I was just another hand working his schemes. But I saw it all. The marshal wasn't there for justice. He came to take your land, Jared, to force you off it so Rogers could claim the water rights. Denton drew first. You only fired because you had to." The world tilted around him, the canyon seeming to close in, the weight of years of guilt pressing down until he could barely breathe. "You're lying," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. The marshal was unarmed. She shook her head again, her voice barely a breath. "He had his pistol drawn when you warned him to leave. I saw it, I swear, on what little's left of my soul. Rogers paid witnesses to say otherwise. The law needed a villain, and you were it." Jared stared at her, the firelight from their tiny camp flickering in his eyes like the last traces of disbelief dying away. For years he'd carried the shame like a chain around his neck, every step of exile a punishment he'd accepted as earned. And now, this woman, the same one who led death to his door, had given him back the one thing he'd buried long ago: truth. He sat in silence for a long time, the desert wind sighing through the canyon like a hymn. "Why tell me now?" he finally asked. She smiled faintly, lips cracked, voice trembling. "Because I can't stand watching you bleed for a sin that wasn't yours," she whispered. "And because you saved me, even when I didn't deserve it." Jared looked away, jaw tight, eyes glinting with something raw and wordless. The fire popped between them, sparks drifting upward into the gathering dark. Somewhere beyond the cliffs, a coyote cried a lonely, keening sound that seemed to echo the truth now hanging between them. And in that hollow of flame and shadow, Jared Raleigh felt the weight of his past shift at last not gone, but changed like the canyon itself had taken his guilt and turned it into stone. The first light of dawn spilled across the canyon like a blade, carving gold into the river's edge where the water ran low and mean between the stones. Jared stood knee-deep in the shallows, revolver heavy in his hand. His shadow stretched long across the current as the posse fanned out above the ridge, 7 riders against 1 man and a half, dead woman clinging to a truth too long buried. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and dust, the kind that tasted like endings. Maddox was at the front, hat low, eyes cold, his rifle leveled at Jared's chest. "You've run far enough, Raleigh," he called, his voice carrying easily through the thin morning air. "Law's caught up to you. Lay down your gun, and maybe I'll make it quick." Jared didn't move, didn't blink, his jaw set like iron. He'd made peace with dying the moment his ranch went up in flames, and if this was where the desert wanted to bury him, then so be it. But before he could raise the gun, she was suddenly beside him, stumbling forward on shaking legs, her feverish face blazing with something fierce and unyielding. "No," she rasped, voice hoarse but cutting through the stillness like thunder. "Not another lie. Not another drop of blood for Rogers's greed." Maddox's rifle wavered, confusion flashing across his face as she stepped fully into the open, sunlight catching the chain still dangling from her wrist. "You think you know what happened?" she shouted. "You don't know a damn thing. Marshall Denton wasn't gunned down by a killer, he was killed protecting a thief's deal. I saw it. Rogers sent the marshal to steal Jared's land, and when he fought back, Denton drew first." The men on the ridge shifted uneasily, murmurs rippling like wind through dry grass. Maddox spat into the dirt, but his jaw had tightened. "You expect me to believe that?" The marshal was Law. Law bought and paid for, she screamed, her voice breaking, tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "Rogers paid witnesses, paid the judge, paid you too, Maddox. How much did he offer to bring Jared in? How much to keep quiet?" The bounty hunter's eyes darkened, the mask cracking for just a moment before rage took its place. "You talk too much, girl," he snarled, lifting the rifle. Jared moved before he thought, shoving her behind him as the first shot cracked the air. The bullet grazed his shoulder, blood misting across the water, but he stayed standing, raising his revolver and firing back. Chaos erupted, the canyon echoing with gunfire and the screams of men as dust and sunlight exploded into a blinding haze. One rider went down, another's horse reared and bolted, the others scattering for cover. Through it all, she stayed upright, shouting the truth again and again, her voice ragged but unstoppable, every word cutting deeper than any bullet. "He's innocent. You all know it now. Rogers made you his hounds." The remaining men hesitated, the grip of justice or guilt loosening their hands. Maddox roared in fury, taking aim once more, but Jared's shot found him first, the sound echoing like judgment itself. Maddox fell backward into the river, his body carried off by the current as silence swallowed the canyon. The smoke cleared slowly, the survivors lowering their guns, eyes fixed not on Jared, but on the woman who had defied death to speak the truth. She sank to her knees, trembling, her strength finally gone, and Jared caught her before she hit the ground. "You did it," he whispered, voice breaking. She smiled faintly, eyes glassy with tears and sunlight. "No," she breathed. "We did." And as the river carried away the blood and dust, the dawn rose higher over the canyon, washing the desert clean if only for a moment. The world erupted in thunder before Jared could even breathe. One last, desperate gunshot splitting the dawn as a stray rider, driven by fear or pride, fired from the ridge. The crack echoed through the canyon, and before Jared could turn, she stumbled forward, eyes wide with shock, her body jerking as the bullet tore through her side. Time seemed to stop, the river froze. The wind held its breath, and the color drained from the world. She fell into his arms, blood blooming across her torn dress, the life spilling from her faster than the river could carry it away. "No, no, stay with me." Jared choked, pressing his hand against the wound, but the warmth beneath his palm was fading fast. Her fingers clutched at his coat, trembling, her lips parting in a soundless gasp before the whisper finally came. "I told you not to save me," she breathed, her voice so faint he had to lean close to hear. Guess you never learned how to listen." A broken laugh caught in his throat, but it died there, swallowed by grief. He held her closer, his blood mixing with hers, both of them painted in the same red that had stained the land for too long. The men above hesitated, their rifles lowering as the truth of what had just happened burned through the haze of smoke and pride. The leader, a grizzled man with years carved into his face and doubt now clouding his eyes, rode slowly down the slope, stopping just short of the riverbank. He stared at Jared holding her, the woman who'd shattered their lives with her dying breath. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the man holstered his gun. "Maybe we've been chasing the wrong man," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of all the miles, all the blood spilled for nothing. One by one, the others followed, silent and solemn, turning their horses away from the river. They didn't look back. Their departure was wordless, a retreat not from fear but from guilt, and as the last hoofbeats faded into the distance, only the murmur of the water and the whisper of wind remained. Jared knelt in the shallows, cradling her head against his chest, his tears falling into the dust that had claimed so much and spared so little. The sun was climbing higher now, its light too bright, too cruel against the ruin of the moment. Her eyes fluttered open once more, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. "It's over," she murmured. "You're free now." Jared shook his head, his voice breaking. "Not without you, I ain't." But her gaze was far away already, fixed on something beyond the canyon, beyond the pain, beyond him. "Then make it mean something," she whispered, the last of her breath leaving her like a prayer. And just like that, the light in her eyes went still. For a long time, Jared didn't move. The wind rose again, stirring her hair against his chest, the river washing crimson around his knees. When he finally lifted his head, the desert was silent but for the whisper of freedom she'd bought with her blood. He closed her eyes, set her gently on the sand, and stood, a man remade in loss. The sky burned gold above him, the land stretching endless and empty, and for the first time, Jared Raleigh felt the terrible weight of freedom, the kind that came with a price no one should ever have to pay. For a moment he thought it was just the wind, the faint stir of her hair against his arm, the trick of a grief-drunk mind refusing to let go, but then her eyes fluttered open again. Those same storm-gray eyes now dimmed but still burning with that fragile, stubborn fire that had carried her this far. Her lips moved, bloodied and dry, and he leaned close, his shadow falling across her face as the sun climbed higher. "Now, make it quick," she whispered, each word trembling through the air like a dying leaf. The request hit him harder than any bullet, splitting something deep inside that no healing could reach. His hand shook as it hovered near the revolver at his side, the instinct screaming to end her pain, to grant her the mercy this land never had, but he couldn't. Not after everything. Not after she dragged him back from the grave of his own shame and made him see that mercy wasn't surrender. "I can't," he breathed, the words breaking against the weight in his chest. Her hand slipped weakly against his, the smallest of smiles touching her lips, the kind that forgave what the world never could. "Then live," she murmured. "Do better than I did." And with that, the desert took her back, as gentle as it ever could be. Jared stayed beside her long after the sun had burned the sky to ash, long after the river ran clear again. He dug her grave beneath a lone mesquite tree at the edge of the canyon, where the roots reached deep and the wind hummed through the branches like a hymn. He laid her down, wrapped in his coat, the same one she'd bled through, and covered her with the earth she'd died trying to redeem. The act felt like breaking and healing all at once. When it was done, he sat back on his heels, staring at the marker he'd made. A rough wooden plank torn from the wagon, the knife in his hand trembling as he carved the words she'd left him to understand. Mercy ain't weakness. It's love in its hardest form. Each stroke bit, deep, the letters rough and uneven, but honest, the way truth always was. He sat there until the stars came out, until the chill crept in, and the coyotes began their distant mourning. Then he rose, slow and hollow, the revolver still heavy at his hip but his heart strangely lighter, filled with something that felt like purpose instead of penance. He saddled the horse what little strength it had left and turned away from the canyon. Behind him, the grave caught the moonlight, and for an instant, it looked like she was still there, watching, urging him onward. He didn't ride fast this time. There was no need to outrun ghosts anymore. The world stretched open before him, wild, scarred, and unforgiving, and for the first time in years, Jared Raleigh rode not as a hunted man, but as a free one. He didn't know where the road would lead, only that wherever there was injustice, he'd meet it with the mercy she'd died to teach him. And as dawn began to rise again over the endless plains, he tipped his hat to the wind and whispered the only prayer he knew. "Rest easy now. I'll carry it from here." Then he rode on, leaving behind the tree, the grave, and a love too fierce for the desert to ever truly bury.